was not expecting this trade to happen at all, but low-key, I kind of was. In a very questionable time during the offseason, we get one of the biggest transactions all summer long, as the Minnesota Timberwolves decided to cut ties with Karl Anthony Towns, send him to the New York Knicks, and in return receive Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and a first-round pick from the Detroit Pistons. And I'm not gonna lie, heading into this video, there were a lot of questions circulating in my mind, in particular how exactly I'm going to start off this breakdown. And so you may be asking yourself, why? Why would a team coming off of one of the most successful seasons in franchise history found themselves in the conference finals with a 23-year-old leading the charge, and not just as a franchise player, but Anthony Edwards is entering top 10 status in the NBA. But more importantly, the decision that many people started to question of this idea of having two 7-footers in an NBA that is going more small end up being potentially the biggest difference maker, and yet you wanted to blow all of that up. Well, the answer to that question is very simple. They just don't want to pay Karl Anthony Towns. 2 years ago, Towns signed a 4-year, $220 million contract extension, and this upcoming season is year one of that new deal, where he's going to be paid $49.2 million this season, next year $53.1 million, the year after that $57 million, and in 2027-2028 a $61 million player option. Saying that out loud is ridiculous, but to further put these numbers into context, next year, Karl Anthony Towns is going to get paid more money than Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, and even Giannis Antetokounmpo. Crazy! So of course, Minnesota doesn't want to have to pay Karl Anthony Towns that much money, and in all honesty, this is an extension of the conversation that we were just having in my last video. Basically, several organizations are having to restructure their financial decisions due to the restrictions that the new CBA has placed them under, and the Timberwolves were constantly in this conversation with the deal that Karl Anthony Towns signed. And with him making upwards to $60+ million within the next 4 years, as well as other decisions that the Timberwolves had to make financially, with other players such as Naz Reid and Akil Walker-Alexander coming up with their deals having to be renegotiated as well. It was only a matter of time that this tough decision was going to have to be made, and honestly, it sucks, because I genuinely believe that Karl Anthony Towns in this last postseason played well enough for the Timberwolves to give it at least one more year before they decided to go in a different direction. In a league where teams decided to zig in the direction of small ball, the Timberwolves decided to zag in a different direction, provide two 7-footers with the addition of Rudy Gobert 2 off seasons ago, and a lot of people thought it was going to be questionable, in large part because of who Karl Anthony Towns was defensively. In this last postseason run, he exceeded many people's expectations, including my own, especially in the first 2 rounds where he was amazing, not just offensively as he averaged 19 points, 9 rebounds, and shot the hell out of the ball, not only from the mid, not only in post, but in particular from behind the arc. But more importantly, the Timberwolves being able to employ Towns with his length on Kevin Durant and Jokic, which then allowed Rudy Gobert to play backline help, really was a difference maker on what this team was able to provide. And because of that sustained defensive excellence, even when Towns was on the floor, it meant that this team was able to retain their offensive firepower that they desperately needed. When Cat was on the floor, the Wolves were about roughly an average offensive team. However, when he was off the floor, their offensive rating plummeted all the way to 110. So to keep Towns on the floor was something that they desperately needed. His 3-point shooting was very valuable, and the length that he provided was a difference maker. So moving off of Karl Anthony Towns, even if it does come across as an obvious decision, it's still a huge blow, because it definitely felt like the Minnesota Timberwolves didn't just find a winning formula, but they found the formula, a formula that was going to put several teams in matchup problems throughout the next handful of seasons, while also finding a solution for the potential Jokic problem that it seemed as if like no one in the NBA had an answer to. Towns played a huge role in that, and so it does suck to see him unfortunately be on a chopping block and being shipped off to the New York Knicks, but it could all pan out for him later on down the line. But going back to the nuances of everything, like I said in my last video, this CBA is hell, man. It's crazy. The new rules that are set in place that is going to really prevent certain organizations of building rosters in certain ways, it's hell. We are talking about a Minnesota Timberwolves team that had a lot, and I do mean a lot of potential, coming off of a great season and making a massive shift in what exactly their roster is going to look like moving forward. And no, I do not believe that Julius Randle is going to be a staple of what this team is going to look like long term, rather than a footnote in his career, because I do believe the biggest advantage and the biggest reason why the Timberwolves moved off of Karl Anthony Towns is because they didn't want to have to pay him $50 to $60 million for what he provided utilized for this team as a second or third scoring option on a night-to-night basis. But I want to be clear, I'm not the only one who thought about this. This has like been a really badly kept secret in the NBA community. Everyone kind of had a feeling that Karl Anthony Towns was going to be moved in the next year or two anyway, because where the Minnesota Timberwolves fell in terms of their financial commitment. This year, they've already committed north of $200 million to their roster. That was going to be a consistent theme next year as well. And with Rudy Gobert, Nikhil, and Nas coming off the books in the next year or two, they were going to have to sign them back onto the roster as well if they wanted to keep their depth and defensive identity that, in all honesty, they built a lot of success off of over the past year or two. And so if they wanted to do that, it would be practically impossible for them to pull that off if Towns was still going to be on the roster, especially at the price point of $49, $50, $60 million. Like that's a lot of money. A lot of that value can be reproduced with Nas Reed, if we're just going to be honest with ourselves. A lot of that was seen all throughout the regular season and playoffs. Nas, power forward, three-point shooter, better defender, better athlete, moves his feet a little bit more as well. So not only do you still get the floor spacing value from Towns, but you get a better defender, better athlete at a significantly less price point. So man, it makes a lot of sense. And then to further the lack of floor spacing, especially coming off of the bench, you add someone like Dante on the roster, great three-point shooter who also keeps up the defensive identity, had a great year with the New York Knicks last season, should be able to carry that over to the Timberwolves. And now we have a Minnesota team that once more built their identity off of defense, adds even more perimeter defense, and that guard rotation is going to be hell defensively. You're going to go from Anthony Edwards to Nikhil to Dante to Jaden. I mean, on the perimeter, it's going to be nonstop clamps. But with that being said, let's go ahead and attack the elephant in the room, and that is Julius Randle. He ain't a part of the bigger picture here. Trust me when I say that. Like I said before, footnote of his career, the fit doesn't make any sense, and there's already been news broken that Randle was looking for a contract extension from the Knicks. They were unwilling to do so, so they knew that they needed to move in a different direction and at least receive someone in return that just best suited what that roster was going to look like out in New York. And so Randle wasn't that player from a financial standpoint and wasn't that player from a playing style standpoint because they wanted more three-point shooting, and that's where Towns comes into play. But Randle on this roster financially is probably still not going to make any sense because of the extension he's looking for, and from a playing style standpoint is a severely worse fit for what this Timberwolves team clearly needs, especially at the power forward position. And I do believe this is where a lot of the concerns may raise for the Timberwolves in this upcoming year, because unfortunately it does seem as if like this is going to be a transitional year. Sure, Julius Randle, good score, it's a good, nice little scoring punch, should be able to be a bit more dynamic than Karl Anthony Towns at the power forward spot. I can see him doing a couple of things here and there, but I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves. Let's call it a spade a spade. Julius Randle, where he likes to get his shots from, very similar shot selection from Anthony Edwards, mid-range shooter, post-up player, doesn't really swing the ball that much, and in particular is going to be sharing a front court with Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels. Yikes! I'm going to go as far as to say, when you look at the starting five for the Timberwolves after this trade, it might actually just make more sense for Randle to come off of the bench and insert Nas Reed in the starting five to continue that floor spacing that Towns provided, still give you better defense, overall better floor spacing. In all honesty, might make more sense than anything else, but obviously I know the politics and how much you get paid, and my name is Julius Randle, so I gotta start. But in my honest opinion, it might just make more sense for Randle to come off the bench. Nevertheless, I don't really think it matters. I think a lot of people are way too focused on Julius Randle fitting on this roster. We know he doesn't. We know what he looks like in the postseason. Trash. And we know for a fact that if it didn't work last season and it looks really sketchy at times when Jaden wasn't able to make his shot and Nikhil wasn't able to make his shot, and if Ant couldn't dribble, drive, and penetrate and make the right reads in a zone led by and anchored by Derek Lively from the Dallas Mavericks, we know for a fact it ain't gonna look that good with Julius Randle on the floor. We know that already. And moreover, I just think that this is a trade to make more wiggle room financially rather than putting yourself in financial hell by paying Karl Anthony Towns $50 to $60 million on a year-to-year basis. Now, if that's the case, you may be asking, well, why the hell would the Knicks Knicks do it? In all honesty, I don't know. Now, let me be fair to the Knicks. I understand what they're doing, right? I love the floor spacing, the three-point shooting, have it at every position. Jalen Brunson, MVP caliber season coming up. The ball will be in his hands every single possession. He's going to go out there, give you 28 plus. I wouldn't be surprised if it's around 8 to 9 assists, quality shooting splits, great floor spacing, defensive versatility at practically every position except for obviously Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. And so I do understand what that offense is going to look like. And then you surround those two with a bunch of defensive oriented players, with Mikal Bridges, with Josh Hart, OG Anunoby. Like, it makes sense. I can see how it works. And hopefully all of us are crossing our fingers that, you know, Mitchell Robinson comes back. He looks good as well. And putting Mitchell Robinson at the 5 instead of Towns will also help out what this team looks like moving forward. And to give a much more direct answer to the question of, well, why the hell would the Knicks do it? Simply put, because they believe that Karl Anthony Towns might be the answer to their questions. They can convince themselves now that this is a roster that has elevated to title contending status, that Karl Anthony Towns is that final piece, the missing piece of the puzzle that now puts him in territory near the Boston Celtics. But I just don't see that. I think in many regards, this team has slowly gotten worse after every single trade that they made throughout the offseason. At first, I love the Mikal Bridges trade. I love what they did acquiring him. You can certainly argue that what they gave up was pretty extensive, but I was fine with that. Retaining OG Anunoby seemed inevitable, but the price point to me was a bit excessive, especially if it meant that they were going to lose Isaiah Hartenstein, which unfortunately they did. And now not just losing Randall, but also Dante for this Towns trade, I'm not really sold as much as I was before with the Knicks. Again, I'm not mad at Towns. I like the idea. He certainly complements what this team is trying to do offensively, which is a huge problem that they had all season long. I think a huge reason why Towns looks really good, or at least acceptable and passable defensively last year, is because he had Rudy Gobert backline help with Jaden and Anthony Edwards on the perimeter. It ain't going to be that if Mitchell Robinson isn't there, and obviously Mitchell Robinson isn't the same defender as Rudy Gobert. And then you also have to deal with the injury problems as well. OG Anunoby pretty consistently has been in and out of lineups over the past 3 to 4 years throughout his career, so that's also going to be very concerning. I do believe the biggest X factor on this team now is Mikal Bridges. Reduce offensive load, but still should be able to be a much better offensive weapon than a lot of other second or third options in the NBA, but also should be able to go back into that defensive wing that we saw back in Phoenix, now with the reduced role offensively, while also playing alongside someone like OG Anunoby. And looking at your payroll 2-3 years down the line, and you're looking at Towns, Mikal, and OG making more money than Brunson, and you still can't get past the Sixers, or you still can't get past the Bucks, and I still feel very confident that the Boston Celtics are still a better roster. I just feel like it's a commitment that, I don't know. I don't know. I do believe you could have just waited another year or two and waited for a legitimate star to present themselves, maybe frustrated with their situation. Who knows? There's a bunch of Giannis news always breaking, right? Could have waited for that to occur first before I would have committed to Karl Anthony Towns. But I will say this, biggest winner in this whole transaction, the Denver Nuggets, not even close. If I'm Denver, every single year moving forward, I was trying to figure out an answer to that double big lineup, and you're telling me you voluntarily decided to blow it up? Oh, man. Thank you. Hey, thank you. Oh, man. It's going to be a tough year for y'all Minnesota Timberwolves fans. Hey, T-Wolves fans, man, I feel for you. Towns really held it down. And y'all go from Towns to Julius Foulius? Tough, man. That's tough. But yo, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. This new CBA is treacherous. It is hell. Teams are blowing up winning formulas just because they don't want to have to pay steep, and I do mean steep, restrictions, limitations, penalties, just to keep a roster that is successful together. But yo, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the subscribe button, notification bell. Until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.